a major AT&T nationwide outage. AT&T saying that it's working on the issue, but no cause has been released just yet. Hugh Odom is the president of Vertical Consultants, joining us now live to talk more about this. Thank you so much, Hugh, for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Of course. Well, first off, I want to talk about the possible causes here for what could have led for this to happen, because at this point, AT&T has not said what they believe caused this nationwide outage. What are the possible, causes that are being looked into?
Well, the key word you just said is nationwide. You usually see this sometimes in a local area based upon service in Miami or Chicago or somewhere in that instance. But in this case, it's nationwide. So there's two suspects that could be in play. One, we have an overloading of the system. You can't hand off calls, and there's an issue inside the wireless network that AT&T is working off of. When they're putting out 5G, what the issue is right now, the infrastructure is overloaded. When you get that overloaded capacity, you have issues. Basically, think of it like a bunch of cars on the highway. The more cars you put on the highway, you slow down, then you come to a stop, and then nobody can move. The other possibility, which I hope it isn't, but when you have this kind of major outage across the country, it's a possibility of a cyber attack on the actual wireless network. And with 5G, because you're spreading that network farther and farther, you have more exposure, and that allows culprits to get inside that network and cause issues.
What about the length of time? Because this has been going on for several hours. Is it something that normally would be fixed fairly quickly, or does it kind of depend on the situation?
Well, I think that's a key indication, because this started overnight and here we are into the early morning and we still don't have a cause and we don't have a solution. So there's a major disruption inside AT&T, and this is hitting some of the other carriers as well, but it's hitting the other carriers with regard to if they're piggybacking off the AT&T network in your area. So the first indication would be they don't know exactly what's going on. They're trying to find it. And that's not a good place to be if you're AT&T or any other carrier using an AT&T network. So right now, I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon, because it seems like the growth of the outage is expanding, not contracting.
Yeah, I was going to say this right here is pretty much useless right now, like many people are saying, because unless you have Wi-Fi where you are, you can't really make calls. Now, one thing that we've heard discussed a lot is that folks who are trying to call 911 can't even do that. So I guess it kind of shows how dependent everything is on the use of a cell phone.
Yes, people take a cell phone service for granted. And I tell people, cell phone service used to be looked at as a luxury. It is our fourth utility. Communications for everyday usage, business usage, and as you mentioned, emergency services are vital. And this is why we see the fragility of the actual networks. Right now, the infrastructure is not built out enough for the network capacity that we're showing out there. We're pushing too much data and don't have enough cell towers, et cetera. And the cell towers we have need to be upgraded, and they're very valuable, but they're not upgrading them to have the capacity to meet our needs. So we're having a situation by which we're seeing some of that results right now. And the interesting thing is AT&T here recently is trying to get rid of landlines across the United States, which impacts lower income and rural areas. So think of this: if you don't have a landline and your cell phone goes down, where do you go to communicate with anybody, more or less 911 services?
Kind of going in reverse a little bit, I want to get your take on the flow of information from AT&T so far this morning. We received a statement from them, and they essentially said at this point they're working on the issue. They know there are reports of outages nationwide. How do you feel about the response by AT&T as this is ongoing?
Well, there's two things I'd mention. First, if you don't have your cell phone and you rely upon that to access internet, your email, et cetera, you won't get the notice. So you're kind of stuck with no indication of what's going on. Second, they've been just putting out dribbles of information and giving no indication of what the issue is. And like I said, that's not a good sign that they have their hands around this to try to figure it out. So right now, there are customers around the country. And again, this is around the United States, not localized. And they don't know what to do. And they're having to rely upon other means of communication. And that puts everybody into some troubling situations, just if you want to communicate with your kids, your loved ones, et cetera. But as I mentioned, if you have an emergency situation or a vital situation, you may not be able to connect with 911. You may not be able to connect with people that need to get to you. So this is very important. They get information out. AT&T gets information out through some means by which people can understand what the next steps are.
Does this kind of indicate how fragile cell service is when you're talking about something that can happen to it and cause issues like this? We're talking about a nationwide outage.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, people drive down the road, they see cell towers, they kind of overlook them, they see the situation in their wireless network, and they take it for granted. And if you think about this, if you lose cell service on a local level or on a national level, as we are experiencing right now, how it impacts so many parts of our daily lives, our business lives, medical situations, everything down the road. So we as a country, the U.S. is falling so far behind the rest of the world with regards to the wireless infrastructure. We have to see the importance of this as, again, not a luxury, but a vital part of our lives on a daily basis. And this is showing that impact right now when you have thousands of people across the country getting impacted, and it's just escalating.
My last question for you here, how often do we see something like this happen, especially when you are talking about a major outage? You're talking coast to coast here, and it's been out for several hours with no indication of when service could come back.
Well, the bad thing I would say is you don't see it as often as you might think, but we're seeing it more often as they're rolling out the networks. More and more people are using data. So again, that exposes this to situations like this that could come up. And when again you have all this data and all these users on the wireless networks, this becomes an issue. So if you asked me 5 years ago, I'd say it didn't happen that often. You asked me 5 months ago, I'd say it's happening more often. You haven't asked me today, I say we're going to see it more and more often until we get the infrastructure built out. It's just that simple. You can't put all this stress on the infrastructure and not expect situations like this to occur.
All right, Hugh Odom there, president of Vertical Consultants. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and help break this down. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, I think the big thing is everybody needs to have a backup system with regards to the wireless communications, a landline, satellite system, something of that nature, because again, this is important, but until we get it built out sufficiently, you better have a second level of access to communication.
All right, thank you again for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you.